No propaganda, no lies, and definitely no BS. You're with Johnny Vedmore on today's News Talk, TNT.
Welcome back to the Johnny Vedmore Show on today's News Talk TNT. I'm here with Dr. Jerome Corsi, and you've written a book entitled The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis, which it's claimed presents indisputable forensic evidence that 2 shots fired from the front and 1 shot fired from the rear killed the president. My first question then is, was it David Ferrie and Jack Valenti who fired the shots from the front, do you think?
Well, we don't know. I mean, the point of the book is not to name the shooters. The point of the book is that this Dr. David Mandick, my co-author, who has a Ph.D. in physics, his specialty was radiation. He became an M.D., practicing physician. He's a radiation oncologist. He's been reading x-rays for cancer patients for more than 4 decades. He's seen the JFK skull x-rays from the autopsy that are in the archives more than anyone else. And what he's been able to determine by doing optical density measurements, this is you take a scientific instrument and you can measure the light coming through the x-ray to know exactly what you're looking at. All 3 of the extant x-rays are forgeries. They were altered to mask evidence of frontal shots. There's evidence of 2 clear frontal shots. One had Jack Kennedy and the right by the ear in the temporal bone, and it blew out the right back of his head, the occipital bone. And the other one hit at the hairline above his right eye, and you can see a bullet trail across the top quadrant of JFK's head. That it was a bullet that broke up. You can clearly see the bullet fragments. They enter at the front. The bullet fragments do not exit the skull, and the largest fragment is at the back. Having the most weight, the largest fragment would have the most momentum, and it would travel the farthest. So that's clearly a frontal shot. And it's also corroborated by the witnesses, the shot, and there were 3 headshots, one at a low angle from the back. That hit the head first. It pushed Jack Kennedy's head forward. You saw all the plume of brain matter going up to the right front. That was at frame 313. Less than 2 seconds later, in frame 331 of the Zapruder film, Jack Kennedy's right side of his head explodes. So it's a new shot. The back of his head is blown out, and he's pushed violently back into the left. Clint Hill, who's the Secret Service man, who's climbing onto the back of the limousine at that time, is sprayed in the left of the back of the limousine with JFK's blood and brains, as is the motorcycle operator officer who was in the inboard motorcycle just behind Clint Hill. So this was clearly a shot from the grassy knoll. There was a shot through the windshield that hit Jack Kennedy in the throat. So there were at least 3 shooters, one on the grassy knoll, one at a low angle by the Daltex building behind Jack Kennedy, and one on the opposite side of Dealey Plaza, the south side, by the railroad yard above the triple underpass. And those are at least 3 shooters. Any shots from the front mean that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the lone gun assassin. We've been lied to for 60 years, and the government has been altering the evidence. Clint Hill knew that was a shot from the grassy knoll. He knew that because he got splattered with the blood, and Kennedy was thrown violently back into the left. Jackie Kennedy reached out in the back of the car, got out of the back of the car, and grabbed on the left a piece of Jack Kennedy's head to get it put back together again, which she did. He was sitting upright by the time they went through the triple underpass, dead, but she was in a blackout. At any rate, there was no headshot fired from the 6th floor of the Dallas, Texas School Book Depository, and I doubt that Oswald ever fired a shot that day. I think this was a government coup d'etat. This was the day the deep state decided just to operate in the open, kill the president, lie about it, set up a patsy, kill the patsy, and make sure that story is stuck now for 61 years. And it's a lie. And the absolute evidence of it, indisputably, is in the x-rays. When you get a copy of the book, just take a look at that headshot that goes through the right top, and you can see the bullet fragments very clearly. It had to have been a liquid mercury bullet that could not have been removed in the pre-autopsy surgery that we also document was done to alter JFK's wounds at Bethesda. This is the book. It's over 500 pages long. It's very, very thoroughly illustrated all the way through. Everything we're talking about, you can see, is fully illustrated with the medical evidence. And we decided that the scientific part is all in the appendices, and the text is written in a very common sense language that is actually entertaining to read and does not require an advanced reader. Everybody should be able to read this book and get the point.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because these things need to be solved one bit at a time. And it's like I repeat to the people listening and watching, the book is called The Assassination of President John F. Kennedy, The Final Analysis. And you can see it up there on the screen at the moment. So I was going to ask you, what do you think happened in Dealey Plaza that day? Was JFK assassinated in a conspiracy enacted by the U.S. intelligence infrastructure? But that is what you believe happened, yeah?
Yes. Within minutes of when Lee Harvey Oswald was apprehended, about an hour in the flight back to Washington, D.C. of Air Force One, the CIA distributed internationally a brief on Oswald that had his whole life history to it, including that he had been a Marine who had worked at a secret air base in Japan and defected to the Soviet Union. The limousine was brought into Parkland Hospital. Secret Service can be seen in video washing the back seat, altering evidence. They got that when spectators begin to see the shot through the windshield and recognize it as a frontal shot, because the inside of the glass had beveled and flown back at Jack Kennedy. The Secret Service got the car out of there, and they ultimately flew the car to Dearborn, Michigan that Sunday after the assassination on Friday, and they changed the windshield. So there's an enormous amount of government and altering the x-rays. The doctors at Parkland reported that Jack Kennedy was shot from the front. They reported that accurately. The back of his head was clearly blown out, an exit wound. They saw a puncture wound in the throat. Those wounds were clearly entrance wounds. That was an entrance wound, and the back of the head an exit wound. They gave a press conference. So the doctors at Bethesda all night badgered the doctors at Parkland to change their story. They said if they didn't do it, they would lose their certification. They never practice medicine again. So the government altered the evidence to frame Lee Harvey Oswald. None of the evidence fits together from the government side. Single bullet theory. Well, suddenly they only had 2 bullets to work with. Why? Because James Tague, a bystander, got nicked by a bullet, and there were only 3 cartridges dropped on the 6th floor Texas School Book Depository to frame Oswald. So now they had 2 shots, which did all the damage to Kennedy and to Connolly in the jump seat. They had to say, well, 1 bullet hit Jack Kennedy in the back, came out through his neck, did a right angle turn, hit Connolly in the ribs, broke the radial bone in his wrist and ended up in his knee, and was Committee Exhibit 399, a nearly pristine bullet. Well, there was more lead left in Connolly's body than was missing from that bullet. And that was clearly a fabrication in order to make the evidence fit the cover-up story, which meant altering the evidence. And that's what the government did.
Yeah, they've been very good at doing that. Now, you've lived, I mean, that period of history is so extraordinary. You would have been probably about 12, 13 when JFK was assassinated?
I was 17. 17.
You were 17? Oh, right. Okay, yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what was it like being young during that period? What was that did you feel that it was suspicious then, or were you just like most people in complete awe at the event?
Well, no, I had known Jack Kennedy in terms of seeing him in Washington during the McClellan Committee hearings going back to about 1957. I've seen all the Kennedys, and Jack, Bobby, and Ted Kennedy many times in Congress. Jack Kennedy was aware there was an assassination plot against him. The day it happened, I was convinced that this was a government plot. I thought Oswald was innocent from the beginning. And the thought even occurred to me, 17 years old, that I would write the book someday proving that this was all a government assassination, coup d'etat, and that Oswald was innocent. So this is my second book on JFK's assassination. My first one was 11 years ago called Who Really Killed Kennedy? And there I name Allen Dulles, the CIA, the military-industrial complex. They wanted to go to war. Jack Kennedy did not go to war in the Cuban Missile Crisis. He back-channeled with Khrushchev to find a peaceful solution. He then implemented the Test Ban Treaty. He was not going to go to war in Vietnam. He had signed an executive order, National Security Memorandum, to pull out our advisors and troops. Military, billions of dollars going to be made. Our military wanted to go to war. Curtis LeMay was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had led the firebombing of Germany in World War II, the firebombing of Japan. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was happy to go to a nuclear war with Russia. He thought we had a strategic advantage. Kennedy was appalled at this. And Curtis LeMay shows up at the autopsy smoking his cigar, his characteristic cigar. And when he was asked to put it out, he blew smoke in the face of the Navy corpsman who asked him to put the cigar out. So he was there celebrating Kennedy's death.
It's a completely, it's one of the most epic moments of history. I mean, really, it says where we are. Now, we haven't got much time left. We've probably got about a minute left. Trump promised to release the remaining JFK files, and then he went back on his word, even though some of them were released. He's made the same promise again. Do you think any president really has the brass balls to reveal the truth?
I think eventually it will be released. I think the remaining documents will show indisputably that Oswald was working with the CIA. Some of the recently released documents make that clear already. But the real significance of the Kennedy assassination is the government narratives and lies. We've been living in a Jim Carrey Truman Show. I think its reality is just a CIA script. You know, why did Building 7 and 9/11 that was not hit by an airplane, why did it come down? Where were the weapons of mass destruction when we attacked Iraq in 1991 to get Saddam Hussein? Colin Powell lied. There were no weapons of mass destruction found. Mm-hmm. You know, why was a bad flu made into a pandemic and a vaccine that administered globally that did not prevent you from getting the disease, in fact, may ultimately kill you? And cures like hydroxychloroquine that were banned, and ivermectin that could have saved people. The government, we're living in a CIA-controlled reality with a president who's demented. I guess the only better president for Barack Obama would be a dead president run by AI, and then he could do whatever he wanted.
This is Johnny Vedmore on today's News Talk TNT.